Hello, and welcome to Bookish Haze, a podcast where we get to talk about two of our favorite things, Taylor Swift and reading. I'm Katie.
And I'm Sameen, and every episode we're going to take a book or series and analyze the characters as they relate to songs across Taylor Swift's entire discography.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bookish Haze. We are so excited to talk about the love hypothesis today. I think we've done maybe, two Ali Hazelwood books, so
Yeah.
ready to do our third. And this was, I think, the first one of hers I read, and also her first book. Did I make that up? I feel like it might have.
This was definitely her big debut.
Yeah, nice.
So yeah.
So I'm excited to talk about it because I definitely ate it up and became a Ali Hazelwood fan through this book. So excited to hear what you think, Sameen, because I feel like you were the one who was like, you have to read it.
Yeah. So it was really fun to do the reread of this. I went back into my story graph and I realized that I do it at least once every year. But the first year that we read it, and by we, I mean the first year that I read it and then yelled at everyone around me that they also had to read it. It was like the resurgence of book talk, and it was like, okay, what is the book that's going to get you back into reading? And I think for me, it was like a little bit of ACOTAR and a lot of bit of love hypothesis, especially in just finding out that rom-coms were a thing and that they were such quick reads.
Yes.
Anyway, I read it 3 times in 2022, and I think that is insane behavior, even for me. And it was just I kept wanting to dive back into the world.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that was because of Adam and Olive and just how she wrote the banter and how she wrote these. I think we talked about this for Ali Hazelwood books. Just in general, they're really fun books. And even when they're not well written, you're just wow, I want to stay in this world. And it's really hard to find that.
Mm-hmm. And on that note, let's just get started and dive right in. Do you want to start with Adam?
Yeah, let's do it. So while I was reading this book, the first song that just was honestly I was singing along to it as I was reading was Delicate. And specifically the lines of, is it cool that I said all that? Is it chill that you're in my head? Because I know that it's delicate.
I feel like that is a great one because we don't get his point of view, but he definitely gives off that energy. It's kind of funny reading it from Olive's point of view because I feel like she interprets his tenseness as oh, he doesn't want to be here or whatever. But because we know, or I guess maybe because we know, because we have already read the book before, that he's actually obsessed with her and has been obsessed with her. All those little moments come into a new light of him basically being an anxious stress ball of oh, what if she doesn't like me, or I don't know, basically also him being super turned on half the time. But yeah, so I think Delicate's a really fun one for that, and I love that you're singing that in your head.
Yeah, it was a very immediate one, and just kind of on that note of we don't get his point of view. I feel like there was I feel like she published his point of view for a couple of chapters and they were circulating for a while. So I think that kind of helped and really shaped the way that I obviously reread the book. But the other piece of it was just the monologue scene. I love a good monologue. And his monologue was exactly what it needed to be. And it was just give me everything and everything that you were thinking throughout this entire book at every single point in time. And he just summed it up really perfectly. And the specific time that I linked back to this song in particular was part of it was okay, anytime he says anything and he just kind of reacts and is is this okay, can I and then there's that trope. I don't even know if it's a trope, but it's that moment where in any rom-com where they're we're friends, right? And the other person is yeah, we're friends. And everyone's you both are thinking about this in the wrong fucking direction. So there was that scene. And then there was also the scene where she returned his phone charger.
Mm-hmm.
And he was yeah, this is the deadline, but we should still go out. And she was it's time to go. And he was is it cool that I said all that? And she was no.
Yeah, that scene was so heartbreaking because I just felt so bad for Adam since he was blindsided by it, even though we know Olive was trying to do this out of niceness because she was obsessed with him and also didn't think he liked her back.
Yeah,
but he was just oh, super excited to talk to her and say hi, and then it was just kind of that, oh, this just happened, processing of it all. So poor Adam.
He's so sad. What do you have for him?
So I actually was going to somehow put this in no matter what book we read, but I picked August, which I do think worked. But happy August month, y'all. And my birthday actually are both our birthday months, so let's go Leos.
Yes.
But I also think it was like pretty applicable. So I had like Salt Air and the Rest on Your Door. I never needed anything more. Whispers of Are You Sure? Never have I ever before. Because I was just like, he's so down bad for her. Like literally 6 years, or I think it was something like that, where he was pining after this girl that he met in the bathroom. And so he like didn't need anything more than what she was willing to give him. And also like the Are You Sure is kind of funny to me because we had that they had that whole scene of like giving consent, which was so sexy, but like how she was basically a virgin. I was like, yes. And then the other
Good talk.
Yeah, right. I also had like August Slipped Away into a Moment of Time because it was Nevermind, which, speaking of that scene, reminds me of when Olive admitted that she liked Adam and then tried to cover it up when he accidentally like caught her saying that, by saying she was talking about someone else. And also when she broke up with him and Adam was just like so disappointed and like upset, or I guess not really upset.
You were never mine.
Yeah, exactly. Like he was just so resigned to it because he didn't really expect anything to come of it. Also, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, was it August when they started dating? Because if the deadline was September 29th. Yeah. So like, wow. I just put that together.
Yeah. I really love this like deadline aspect of the song too, where it's just like, yes, this happened in August, but it was like August was always going to slip away at a moment in time. That was the game plan.
Exactly. And the other lines I had that just like made me laugh was like, will you call when you're back at school? I remember thinking I had you. Which also kind of relates to the line. It was like, literally call me anytime after they broke up. And then canceled my plans just in case you'd call back when I was living for the hope of it all, which like, to be fair, he had no life and probably no plans anyways, but like he was staying at Stanford because Olive was there. And then only interviewed at Harvard after she said she was going. So he really was living for the hope of it all.
Yeah, not the email response to her slide deck, I think it was, for her presentation at like, she was like, it was like 5:38 in the morning and he responded with like a typo. And I was like, why are you checking your email at 5:30, dude? Go to sleep.
Literally.
But it's cute. So I guess that works.
Yeah, it is cute. Also, I'm like, he has to have like a special alarm sound for anything she does, because how are you waking up at that time?
No, honestly, unless it's like to get up and go for a run. But then she also came over to his house at like 9 o'clock in the morning. Anyway, I'm like, I don't know what his run times are, but unless he was literally running like a 20K in the morning, that's ridiculous. We don't have to go down the route of me talking about running. That's going to take up years. But on the note of like August and all of this like wistfulness, I had also thought about Enchanted. Again, I think this was like, yeah, a little bit during the monologue scene and a little bit just like when they both started to realize, I think the way that she wrote that piece where they started to realize that they were like, that they had met each other before, because they both talked about how like maybe this is a thing that's happened and they both kind of suspected it. But I liked how like the quote unquote big reveal of that to each other was actually like really simple. So I did pull Enchanted just a little bit for like that first day that they met, but I also really loved the line of like, my thoughts will echo your name until I see you again. Those are the words I held back as I was leaving too soon. And I was like, okay, this feels like the end of the book, right? I was enchanted to meet you. Please don't be in love with someone else.
Yes.
Please don't don't have somebody waiting on you. And I was like, this feels like it fits.
Yeah, it's extremely accurate. I think like, I mean, even just going back to, again, how they first met, like she was not in her best state. Like she could not see him. How he was enchanted to meet her, like, don't ask me, but he was. So I think it's like the perfect song to kind of describe it. Especially because we then see him like arrange his life around her and like her coming to Stanford anyways. So it's that kind of like magical, like enchantedness vibe. And continuing on the whimsical train, just because I feel like, I don't know, like I said, we don't get that much of Adam aside from like Olive saying he's super nice and everyone else saying he's like an asshole, but we don't actually know like his perception of things. I actually had crazier. So I think like it's kind of the journey of how people see, like I just said, like people see Adam versus how he sees himself and how Olive like kind of experiences him, because it's like, I've never gone with the wind, just let it flow, let it take me where it wants to go, till you open the door and there's so much more. Because I was like, there's no way this man believes in like spontaneity or anything like that before he met Olive and had the first interaction. And Olive's always wondering like why he said yes to her and like agreed to fake date. But I think that situation for him was probably a little bit of like, just let it flow, let it take me where it wants to go. We'll see what happens, but this is kind of my like one shot. And also there's the line that's like, I watched from a distance as you made life your own, which like no explanation needed there since it was so long that he was pining after her. And then feels like I'm falling and I'm lost in your eyes. You make me crazier, crazier, crazier. Which even like if you think about Holden talking to Olive about like Adam and on saying like, oh, I can just see how he looks at you and you look at him. Holden's never seen Adam like that before, and she is driving him crazier. That's in like the best way, and like showing a different side of himself essentially.
Yeah, I like this call out of his like lack of spontaneity, and also just the song in general. I feel like we've mentioned it, or you've mentioned it actually a couple times since it was reperformed on the Eras tour for the first time, and I love that song. And I did go back and watch the Hannah Montana movie solely for the purpose of, or not solely, but like mostly driven by the purpose of like getting to witness the song happen on that movie.
Great reason.
But yeah, I think that's 100% like on track. It was very much just like, he did feel crazier and it did feel like whimsical, and just like, I liked that Holden was like, I've never seen him this way before. Holden was also, can we just take a moment for the amount of chaos that man brought into everybody's life? And also a secondary moment, because just like, I cringed when I read "you smartass," and I was like, please say something else.
I know.
Please choose a different set of words.
There was a lot of repetitiveness there in descriptions, as we know, hence why we know that he's like broody, antagonistic, tall,
unapproachable.
Oh yeah, antagonistic and unapproachable.
Yeah, but I guess those pet names got a little bit better as she wrote more books, and yes. I will leave it at that. The last song that I had for him was "You Belong With Me."
That's a good one.
And I think for that one, part of the reason I was like looking at it and I was like, I feel like I picked a lot of songs that were just like at the beginning of relationships, which like, to be fair, was like this entire book was like the beginning of a relationship. So obviously it was like, if you could see that I'm the one who understands you, been here all along, so why can't you see? You belong with me, you belong with me. And that I think applied to, again, like that time when he was like finally able to admit it. And then we saw those moments where he was like, where he had been there all along and where he thought that she didn't see. But I also just liked the concept of like you said, the bathroom scene happened. And then it was like years later that this whole thing went down. And he was like, I have been here and I have like looked after you and looked for you and gone to your talk sessions. And then just like, also for the, if you could see that I'm the one who understands you, the exact moment where she was like, I was like looking at the timeline and it was like, they were like fake dating for whatever, 3 or 4 weeks. And she walked in and she was like, fuck, I have to give a talk. And it took him about 22 seconds to be like, oh, you're upset because you're going to have to speak publicly. And it was like, okay, this is someone who pays attention to you, considering the fact that you've maybe spent like, I don't know, 4 hours together, which we can talk about the timelines of rom-coms at another point. But yeah. You belong with me.
Yeah, no, that also reminds me of when they were at the coffee shop and she kind of got why is the only word I can think of jump scared by Tom coming in and then like having to present, and Tom was like rapid fire asking, or he was like, what's cool about your project? And Adam's like,
stupid fucking
such
question.
Stupid. Yeah, like why would you ask that? And then like reframed it in a way that like made sense to Olive. And I feel like that was a little bit of him kind of, having known her, or just like even the brief 10-minute coffee breaks they had, like understanding how her brain works and what helps her. And so I know she was like, oh, he might not have known it, but like he made it make sense in a way that I could answer these questions and like, you know, coherently speak. But I feel like he probably knew a little bit more than she like realized about what he was doing. Yeah. So I love that one. I think it's super fun.
What else did you have for him?
Yeah, my last one is actually the lucky one, which was a little bit more focused on like him, like his career, I guess, like him himself, and this perception of him being like an all-star scientist, and versus like how he actually acts and feels, which honestly, when I was writing this, I was like, it's a little bit of a stretch, but I think it gets the sentiment across of what I'm trying to say. So I was like, new to town with a made-up name in the Angel City, chasing fortune and fame, which is like him going into grad school. He obviously wanted to be like a good scientist. He didn't seem like he had an ego where he was like, I'm better than everyone and like I'm gonna go out and like do it, but obviously he wanted to help people or like come up with something that can help people. And then they tell you that you're lucky, but you're so confused because you don't feel pretty, you just feel used, which is like basically reminds me of how he was describing his grad school experience where he was working under this like renowned scientist. So everyone who is like, oh my God, you're so lucky. But the scientist is actually like an asshole and awful and very toxic. I also think it's a little bit of like how he feels now that he's like this tenured rock star professor where he like just wants to do research, but there's all this other like kind of fluff that comes along with it. And like, yes, he doesn't feel pretty or like, you know, smart because he's doing all this rewards. He kind of feels used because he has to like cater to all these, I don't know, kind of like the politics of it all.
Mm-hmm.
I can imagine that he gets like pandered to a lot. But Adam, I feel like doesn't seem like he really would expect anything different because he's like, I'm just a scientist type dude. And then my last line was like, chose the Rose Garden over Madison Square, and it took some time, but I understand it now, which is like basically him almost going to industry over being in academia, which to be honest, it sounds like everyone considers at some point in academia, and so did Adam. And like I think it's very easy to understand why people chose it. So that was my.
At some point, you just want to live out your vacuum dreams.
Yes.
I agree. I like that one a lot. I also think it's funny to think about him like not understanding that he's the lucky one, because I feel like especially with Holden and Tom, and like Tom did that thing where he was just like being terrible the entire time about it. I also hated that line where he was like, he just does that, doesn't he? And she was like, what? And he was like, upstages you. And she's like,
literally what?
I wasn't even fucking supposed to be on this stage. This is what's stressing me out in the world right now. Like, it's not this. She was like, and I was kind of sitting there and I was reading that and I was like, she did go above and beyond though, like 100%. That this was above and beyond. Just because like he decided that he was going to take advantage of that and be a dick about it was like a whole other can of worms, but that doesn't change the fact that like she also effectively upstaged him, which probably was like part of its own issue too. But yeah, I liked how Holden treated him, and I wish that Holden had actually said more during that, because like
thinking too. Sorry.
Yeah, because like no, you're right, because this like grad school line that you mentioned about like, oh, how he was treated, and Holden kind of revealing that entire backstory, and it's like, okay, this feels like it should have been a conversation to be had when he was like, watch your back. And I'm like, what the fuck does watch your back mean? Like, you've known each other for 2 weeks. You have to like, where are the receipts, dude? And he had them. He just needed to share them.
Yeah. I also feel like what he was saying was not anything like crazy. Like, to his point, yes, maybe Adam would have been like, oh, you're being defensive or you're imagining things. But like for all of, like, he could have just said, hey, this is my experience. Like, just, you know, watch your back. And it would have made more sense than just like, oh, Holden doesn't like him for some reason. Like, be careful. Like, yeah, I feel like as Olive, I would just be like ignoring that warning, especially because it's not like he was seeing Malcolm at that point, or she knew like him in that way, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, he was on her committee and he was nice to her. Like, that's about it.
That's it. Yeah. Well, moving on to Olive, just because I really needed to get that rant about Tom out of the way, because it's the fucking worst.
Literally the worst.
I started Olive off with the Archer, specifically the line of who could ever leave me, darling, but who could stay. And I feel like the rest of the song kind of applied. But mostly I was thinking about that time. Like, overall, we know that she doesn't have a great view of herself, which is really fascinating, because I feel like we also, like, she gets across really well the fact that like Olive is brilliant. Like, she's in Stanford, she's in a really competitive program, she decided to do this rather than going to industry. She like is capable of all of these incredible things, and like ended up on this panel, which tells us just like how ahead of the game she is. And I think that one was like interesting because then it was juxtaposed against her like inner monologue and her piece where she was like, everyone around me just tends to die. And she just doesn't seem to see herself in that way of like, I don't know why they left me, but I also don't know why they would have stayed. And just kind of acknowledging those two pieces. And I thought that was a little bit heartbreaking. And I was like, wow, does she think that she is the archer and the prey? I hope not.
Yeah, that is very heartbreaking when you put it like that, especially because obviously I know feelings and beliefs aren't always rational. But I'm like, her dad was just an asshole. Okay, deadbeat father. Fine.
Story
Her
of everyone's
grandparents
life.
presumably just died from like old age.
Life.
Yeah. And I mean,
Great.
obviously her mom got pancreatic cancer and it like happened fast. Like I understand how that could be like super traumatizing since that is like her person, you know?
Yeah.
But I'm like, it's not as if people like your mom like left in the middle of your life. Left intentionally and like was still alive out there in the middle of her growing up. So like
yeah.
I understand like why it feels like that, I guess, but I don't understand it at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that's like the piece where we were talking a little bit about like we've talked about Ali Hazelwood's writing in general and like where some things could be expanded a bit. And I feel like this is one of them. I think we've seen this trope a lot in both like Ali Hazelwood and in Emily Henry books of just like there's something with the parents and that's what's causing the trauma. Which to be fair, it's a pretty solid device to use across the board. Like, yes, this is going to cause trauma every single time. There's like studies about it. But yeah, I feel like this is one of those spaces where if this wasn't a rom-com, like we would have needed her to expand a little bit more on like explain this feeling, like dive into it. But maybe it's just like Olive could go to therapy, but she could also spend that money on like non-expired contacts.
This is true. Yeah. But on kind of on the note of like family, I had picked Begin Again for On because I think like I don't know. It's essentially what Olive says is that she has her family and like Malcolm and On, and she really didn't think she would belong or like it basically at Stanford until On kind of came up and they became friends. And I think she also said that Olive didn't expect it to go anywhere or like kind of thought it was a orientation everyone like comes up to everyone type thing and she would never see her again, but she found like a lasting friendship with On, which I think is beautiful and also like obviously enough of a friendship to fake date this person for a month plus. But yeah, some of the layers she pulled was like, I've been spending the last 8 months thinking all love ever does is break and burn and end, which again going back to her mom dying kind of was that outlook. And then she like decided to go to Stanford and it was all these white men in her class, old boys club or something I believe she called it. And then we tell stories and you don't know why I'm coming off a little shy, but I do, since Olive definitely seems like the less outspoken one. But I think it goes back to like what we were talking about where she's like kind of scared of people leaving. So she's trying to like just avoid giving them a chance at all. And yeah, so On essentially completely transformed her experience and it gave her this family that she didn't really have anymore. And her life kind of began again in the US, which side note, always forget she's from Canada.
Yeah, I really like the 3 moments in the book where they point out that she's Canadian. I think those are really funny, good moments.
Yeah.
But I do like that song a lot and how she like kind of understood that like she kind of felt and found that place and like found her person. And I thought that was really sweet. On the topic of On, I chose vigilante shit for I think similar reasons actually. In sort of like it connects the dots if you like really go out and in and around the map a little bit. But basically it's just like I think it was a lot of like On's vibes, but I think that the way that like Olive obviously showed that she would protect On by doing something absolutely batshit, like on the flip side would go like absolutely up to bat for her. And she was the one who was like very immediately like, we're going to report this. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Like we are on top of this shit. Like I will go to the FBI and get this done for you because you are my friend and because you are someone that I value and because someone has wronged you. And so I really like that kind of like, I think they match each other really well in terms of just like this like opposites attract kind of thing where like you said, like Olive is a little bit of the quieter one and Anna's the one who talks a little bit more. But at the end of the day, like they're both going to like go at the person that's attacking the other or like whatever you want to call it, the like half dating situation, whatever is going to protect the other one. That's what they're going to do.
Yeah. And I think like a small detail, but something that I feel like displays how much On cares about Olive as well, but just their friendship is when On finds out about Olive's situation, she like cries for her, which is like just so I mean, like you have to obviously love and care about someone so deeply. And obviously it was like very hateful stuff. And I'm sure like as a woman as well, it's kind of like sad on that part. But I feel like she was mostly crying for the experience that Olive had to go through because she like cares so much about her.
Yeah. And on the flip side of that, I was just also thinking about all of the chaos that An caused. And
Yes.
just the moment when, like, the moments after that where she was like, yeah, this was a fake dating scheme. And she's like, but you applied the sunscreen. And she was like, who forced the sunscreen into the situation? She was like, ah.
Yeah. Honestly, I think it's like a long joke about on like causing all these situations, but it's so true and it's also so funny because like why is she doing all that?
What a good person to like just really propel the plot forward.
Literally.
On the topic of sort of Olive and An, but what actually ended up being more of an Olive and Adam in my brain was Fearless. So I don't know if it gets better than this. You take my hand and drag me head first, Fearless. And I think part of it, I was initially thinking, like when you were mentioning Begin Again and how she like kind of grew into herself and all of that, I was like, yeah, I feel like this could apply as like a sort of second family piece. But then I left it as Adam as well, because I think the example in particular that I was thinking about was like she got really nervous for that presentation. And she was nervous, like walking into it. There was no doubt about the anxiety that existed there. But I think that it was also just like she seemed to be able to ground herself really well. And she felt like that was a person that she could lean on, like, because like grab my hand and drag me head first, she was like, okay, I can be a little bit fearless here. And I just really appreciated that, like you said, that like he's not particularly spontaneous, but then he had to get into all those situations and it made him crazier. I think in the same way it made her a little bit fearless.
Yeah, I really like that because I think you are kind of right where it's weird. She has like a lot of confidence in herself, or yeah, she has a lot of confidence in herself, but like
Yeah.
I think sometimes she lets the doubt creeps in, which is totally fair, but like she does become fearless when she has not even just Adam, but like you said, like honor all the people who love her, like around her, supporting her. She like realizes she can do it, and all of these people have like kind of different techniques for like bolstering her. Like Adam, I think, helps work through her brain to make stuff feel like more manageable, and An's just like the cheerleader, and it sounds like her and Malcolm have like worked through some things together and stuff like that. So I think it's like it's a good song to kind of, I guess, like encompass how she is fearless, but sometimes that like fearlessness needs like some extra confidence boost from those people who love her.
Yeah, 100%. What else did you have for Olive?
I had Antihero kind of on a similar note of the Archer. I feel like Antihero is a little bit of like You're on Your Own Kid from the Eras Tour, where we bring it up like every other show, or every episode. But it's still, I think, like really applicable as always. Because like going back to what we were talking about, like she kind of is her worst enemy. Like she is the one that is putting the doubts in her head and like kind of she's not really self-sabotaging, because I don't think she does anything that like actually worsens her life, but I think she doubts herself a lot in these moments and like needs those people to remind her that she is a badass bitch. And yeah, and the one that I really was like, wow, this is so her, is like the I wake up screaming from dreaming one day I'll watch as you're leaving, which nothing subtle about that. Her family trauma is like on display. And then yeah, it's me, hi, I'm the problem, it's me, which just sums up her confidence issues. And I was thinking, I was like, I feel like Antihero for Taylor Swift is kind of more an internalization of what the media is saying and like kind of her take on that, whereas Olive's is more just like her lack of confidence in herself makes her the anti-hero.
Yeah, I would agree. And I also think like that whole end of the book area where it was just like talking about Tom and how he just made it infinitely worse, and then she like she like had those confidence issues, and then you got to the end where she was like, fuck, I can't be the person that like messes this entire thing up for Adam, and like it matters so much to him and blah blah blah, and it just like continuously like puts down like, she was like, why are you rooting for the anti-hero? And he's like, because you're not actually my anti-hero. You're probably the hero of my story. And it like takes a second to really comprehend that. Also, it's just like such a vibe. And yeah, and I think like everyone around her does seem like they are worth something more than what she is. I think part of that is also like, honestly, when I was reading this the first couple times, I know that we love An and that she like does kind of, she is a cheerleader, but I think part of her vibrant personality that like really put me off for a bit was just, she was like, I have to do this for BIPOC and STEM, I have to do this for blah blah blah, I have to do this for that, blah, blah, blah. And then it was like, oh my god, breathe, girl. And I feel like part of it was just that An was like, Olive was like, wow, I'm never gonna live up to her, and it's like, no, you will, but you're not in competition with your best friend. And so it like took a second to step away from that like narrative in her head where she just like she didn't feel like she was in competition, but she definitely was like comparing. She was like, Malcolm does all of these incredible things and like spends all this time, and on like really puts herself into it, and she's like, and I'm just here and I'm trying to do this thing for pancreatic cancer. And then Tom came in and he was like, what, for your kindergarten teacher? And it was like, okay, like, thank you for making this infinitely worse on her, when she was already like, she knew that her research question had a reason to be there. And so like she really held on to that piece, but I wish she had something else in her foundation that could bring her up than just like this.
Yeah. No, I think that's totally true, especially because you think about how easily she believed it, which, yes, is like, you know, a self-confidence issue, but I feel like she, like, her critical thinking there when Adam was like, okay, it's a blind review, like, they don't know you're my girlfriend at all. It's like she let her emotions like get the better of her, right? And like that's kind of what had that confidence issue, whereas like she couldn't like self-regulate in the moment. I don't know what I'm trying to say, because like I get it. It's like if someone said disgusting stuff like that to me, I would not be able to handle it. But I think particularly the like science part, not the like sexual harassment part, is just like she has these moments where she's like, yes, I am that scientist girl. Like I know I'm doing good stuff. And like, yes, she got accepted to talk on this panel. And of course it would be a blind review, because why would these randos know that like I'm dating this Stanford professor?
No, I think it makes sense. It's like, it's that piece where it's like she recognizes some of her science stuff, but then she doesn't recognize that like, okay, she can run 2 marathons a year, and that takes a lot of energy and effort and like ability to do it. Like that's an incredible feat to be able to put your body through that in like 6-month cycles every 6 months. Like that takes time and energy and discipline, and she doesn't give herself credit for any of those things. She's just like, oh, like I'm eating the junk food and I'm in science. And it's like, no, you are so much more than that.
Yes.
And like, granted, part of it is like, okay, this is a trope that exists, right? And it just like, and sometimes it's just like a reflection of how we see ourselves as women in society, and we can like really go down a rabbit hole there, which isn't necessary at this exact moment. But I think like it's part of what made her relatable, and it's part of like what I wish didn't make her relatable as a character. And I feel like that piece was really well written, actually.
I was gonna say, I also totally forgot that like she is a runner and runs marathons. Like that is just like a little fact that they sneak in, and I forget about it because they never talk about her actually like training or anything. But yeah, like
I have a lot of questions.
Yeah. On a different note, my last song I had for her was I Think He Knows. Because I feel like she thinks that she is the most obvious girl in the world, and that he definitely knows that she finds him attractive. So I said, like, I think he knows his hands around a cold glass make me want to know that body like it's mine, which is kind of big for her, right? They like talk a lot about how she hasn't really had this much dating history to begin with, but also like needs to feel comfortable with the person to feel like attracted to them.
I love this like quietly queer moment for her.
Right?
And just like not actually having to name it, but just like making it normal. Anyway, continue.
And then I had He Got My Heartbeat Skipping Down 16th Avenue. Got that, oh, I mean, want to see what's under that attitude, which I thought was funny because it's like antagonistic Adam for a reason. But she does like get to see this other side of him, and like see what's under that attitude. And she also like starts to look forward to their coffee dates, which is precious. And the last thing I had is like, I think he knows he better lock it down or I won't stick around, because good ones never wait, which is a little bit more of like what Adam is probably thinking, because he knows how much he likes her, and he wants to be like the best fake boyfriend he can and support her, since it's like this temporary arrangement. But also I feel like it can kind of apply to like how Olive is a scientist and like, you know, looking for labs to like do her research. Like the opportunities for her to leave are like pretty high, considering she is like an actual grad student and will need like more funding. She's not like a professor at Stanford.
Yeah, he was aware that he needed to lock it down and be wherever the fuck she was, because she was going to go where she needed to go. No, I really like that. I think that's a really funny song to it. And I had a train of thought with it. Hold on, what was it? Want to see what's under that attitude. I really like the line where it was like, fuck, Adam Carlson was a known ass. And I was like, what a way to introduce this guy's character, and talk about like the attitude. But I also just liked the like heartbeat skipping down 16th Avenue bit, because in particular, she like kind of said that, not obviously in those exact lyrics, but she was like, yeah, I can't believe that I opened my phone and I like giggled, and I can't believe that I just like really wanted to message him like 3 times to say these hyper specific things over the weekend. And
I was actually kind of sad. Like, it made sense why she didn't text him or send him like that Onion article, but I was like, I just want a moment where she did do that, because I feel like he would be kicking and screaming and waving his feet.
Yeah, I also would have just really enjoyed the like very like sly, like cool response that we would have gotten to that as a text while he was quietly kicking and screaming, and I guess telling Holden about that.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the moment also where she was about to literally send a "you up" text, except like not with that meaning at all. And yeah, and I think the irony of that song is also like, I think he knows, but also like he really didn't know, because they were saying, she was like, because you're in love with someone else, and she's like, what the fuck are you talking about? And also like, I'm not gonna tell you that you're wrong. I was like, you'll have some real communication issues, but I'm a huge fan. The last song that I had for Olive was Invisible String, and I feel like this one was a little bit stupid to write down, honestly, because it was like the premise of the book. But the reason that I still chose it was not just because of the like usual lyrics of like, and all along there was an invisible string tying you to me, like we know those, but a string that pulled me out of all the wrong arms right into that dive bar. Something wrapped all of my past mistakes in barbed wire, chains around my demons, wool to brave the seasons. One single thread of gold tied you to me to you.
Love it.
Tied me to you. Yeah, I guess I will not be going for longer threads of lyrics because I cannot read. But that being said, yeah, I think there was that piece where like the bathroom scene was a string. But I also liked where he like pointed out like our two areas of science really overlap. Like the fact that he even had the option to go out to Harvard and Boston, and then she also happened to like the one person who happened to respond was in Boston, which granted, like we know that that wasn't necessarily like full blown invisible string, but I think that it was just like she happened to make those choices, right? And like it was like this person actually had a space that worked out really well. And then the line where I was laughing a little bit was out of all the wrong arms, because like they did this entire thing just to like get her away from Jeremy and to put on with Jeremy, and I just thought that was really, really funny. But yeah, it's pretty much like there isn't much else to say, right? Like this is the point of the book.
Yeah, no, I think those are really funny lines, and I like that. Like you said, we do talk about that one a lot, but I feel like we pulled out different aspects of it this time, which I really love. And yeah, I don't have anything else to add, but I think that's a very sweet note to end on.
Yeah. Did you have any other songs?
The only other one, I didn't really write anything for it, was I had Only the Young for on, because of what you mentioned, where she was like such an activist for women in STEM and BIPOC in STEM, and so I was like, she would kind of vibe to this song.
She would. I like this. I also had, just on that note of like vibes, for Malcolm, I had Blank Space. And I was specifically laughing about it when he mentioned that he was like, when I said I was training for gold, well, I was training for platinum, or like Holden is platinum. And I was like, wow, this is really adorable. He was like, I do have a blank space. I will write your name. And then it just like really panned out. Although I am kind of concerned by like the speed of that relationship, but whatever works, man.
Yeah, I was also thinking about that too. But yeah, as long as they have a good time, that seems kind of their MO. So
slay. Yeah. Incredible. We're so thrilled. Well, thank you to everyone who tuned in to listen. As usual, please leave your comments on TikTok or Instagram. Let us know what you think. Katie and I realized recently while we were trying to figure out how to structure these things that we tend to agree with each other a lot. So if you have anything to disagree on, please let us know. We are so welcoming disagreements and different points of view. And other than that, definitely rate, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And we will see you in the next couple of weeks.